Hello, listeners of Europe. I'm Lukas Oželis, a journalist at Žinių Radijas, a radio station in Lithuania. In this episode of our Borders podcast series, I'm going to take you to the Lithuanian border with Belarus. I and my colleague Vaidas Markevičius are traveling around this border region to find out if the rising geopolitical tensions are having an impact on people's daily lives. Immediately on arrival at our first destination, Deveniškės, we are struck by the emptiness of this little town. The center is virtually deserted. The country yards in front of the houses are also empty, with some homes themselves looking abandoned. Even the church is closed 6 days a week, one supermarket cashier tells us. Many of the people here speak several languages, which is perhaps not unsurprising given that it is a border region. Children learn Polish, Lithuanian, Russian, and English at school. But since 3/4 of the region's inhabitants are Polish, with many of the remaining quarters stemming from the Russian and Belarusian minorities, it proves a struggle to find people who speak Lithuanian and are willing to talk to us. Indeed, we notice a strong distrust of our camera. Unable to find anybody in Deveniškės who will talk to us, we decide to try our luck in the surrounding villages. Finally, we come across a woman named Ala in the small village of Relė. She's one of the few people who came here from Vilnius instead of the other way around. Originally, she and her husband had just planned to buy a summer house, but it wasn't long before they decided to move here permanently. Ala was only too happy to exchange big city life for the peace and quiet of the countryside, space to grow her flowers, and a strong sense of community. Ala stresses how friendly and polite the people are here in comparison with Vilnius.
I was once on my way to Salsininkai and my car nearly overturned. It was winter, and the people who live here just stopped and asked if I needed help. They said, "We'll pull you out without any problems." There's no such thing in Vilnius. If your car breaks down, everybody just leaves you standing there. The people living here are simple folk. I work in a supermarket now, and I have gotten to know many more of them. I've worked in shops in Vilnius too, but it's completely different there. The people are completely different. Here, people are so nice and polite. They always say hello. This was not the case in Vilnius.
Unfortunately, this sense of tranquility has been disturbed by the migrant crisis. Between August and December 2021, tens of thousands of attempts at unauthorized border crossings were recorded. This large-scale movement, which is believed to have been orchestrated by the Belarusian government under Alexander Lukashenko, brought migrants, mainly from the Middle East and North Africa, to the borders of Lithuania and other EU member states in response to the deteriorating relations between Belarus and European Union. Ala admits that at that time she was really scared. She tells us that migrants would pass through her village in droves. From time to time, she even had to call the border guards out in the middle of the night as there were people wandering around outside her house.
I had to call the border guards to come and pick them up because I have to admit it was really, really scary. At that time, for example, an old woman went to pick mushrooms and she said migrants were walking around in groups of 3. In short, there were things like that here which were really scary.
Ala, who has never had any more concerning encounters with migrants herself, says that in the neighboring village of Dolėnai, migrants had entered a woman's house and nearly set it on fire. During the migrant crisis, the community was on edge. The government was forced to react to this massive influx, which was classed as hybrid warfare. However, its plans to house migrants in Deveniškės brought people out into the streets. Protests ran on for 2 weeks, with people flooding in from all the surrounding villages. Ala tells us that people parked tractors and stood guard outside the building where the migrants were supposed to live. Government officials tried to negotiate, but the community refused to give any ground. Eventually, the authorities abandoned their plans. Bidding farewell to Ala, we move on to a local school, the Adomas Mickevičius Gymnasium, where we met Valentina, the Deputy Director of Education. As it turns out, our sense of the town being empty was spot on. Valentina tells us that fewer and fewer people now live in Devaniškes and the surrounding villages. One of the main reasons for this downward trend is lack of jobs, and Valentina points the finger of blame squarely at central government for pushing the border region to the back of its collective mind.
I think that the central government is really lacking here. We have no jobs here. People have either created some kind of business of their own or they are in farming. But there is absolutely no support from central government is sadly lacking. As long as I have lived here and can remember, jobs have, of course, been on the wane. We still have regular workplaces like schools, a kindergarten and a border guard next to a shop, but no industrial facilities or anything like that.
So the population is shrinking and the school where Valentina works has fewer and fewer children each year. In her view, the key draw of the border region is the cost of living, specifically the low housing prices. But many of those who live here work in Vilnius, some 70 kilometers away.
Many young families have stayed with us in recent years. We are very happy about that. And we all know this is because of the very high price of apartments and houses in or around Vilnius. It is simply not possible to buy an apartment or a house there on a low or medium income. So, most of them now live in Devaniškes or in our area and go to Vilnius to work. I can't say how many people do this, but quite a few. There are even buses to transport our people. They go to work in Vilnius, then return home here.
Student Alina, who we meet in Šalčininkai, finds herself in precisely this situation. She is studying in Vilnius but lives in her hometown and plans to travel to the capital for work in the future.
In Salsininkai, the problem is that you can't find much work, and there is no diversity of work. I am studying digital communication, integrated communication. There are no jobs in this particular field in Salsininkai, at least until now.
So what options are available to people who want to work locally?
What are in demand, at least up to now, are doctors, accountants, and psychologists. Education is another area that Salsininkai is looking for. Everything else is in Vilnius.
Despite the migrant crisis, the border region still attracts little attention from Vilnius or from Brussels. This situation is probably a factor in the low levels of trust in the Lithuanian government in this neck of the woods. One person we interview who asks not to be named reveals that a large number of people in Devaniškes actually support the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko. Indeed, Ala, who we heard from earlier, had openly told us that in the event of war she would stick with Lukashenko. She added that rumors were circulating among the local people that if war broke out, the government would start taking away people's property. Politics is certainly a sensitive topic in this part of Lithuania. This is highlighted by Teresa, the principal of another school, Butrimones Gymnasium. She considers politics as something that can only disturb the otherwise peaceful coexistence of communities made up of a range of national minorities, particularly in the contemporary situation, as she puts it. In other words, in the current context of heightened geopolitical tensions.
The border region is not exceptional, but it's a little bit different, partly because there are a lot of work-related problems here, and partly because of this contemporary situation. We have people who have families and friends in Belarus, but because of the times we are living in, this is all a bit strange. The attitude towards it is very different, you know.
Different how?
The difference is that it is not about politics. People can't communicate as families and come together at the cemetery. This is something that bothers them, even though we understand the situation. People don't wish ill on others.
In fact, openly discussing political issues is so strongly discouraged that Teresa does not even dare utter Putin's name.
I am sad that we divide people according to nationality. Language is not that important. If I speak Russian, it does not mean that I, for example, support you-know-who.
All the people we have spoken to have stressed that the different minority groups live together peacefully along this border. It just seems that to maintain this peace, political issues must be brushed under the carpet.